Hey, Real Life Ministries, welcome to the OverTime Podcast. We're glad you're joining us for week 3 of this series that we've been in titled UnBelievable. And in this series, we're kind of taking an apologetics approach to a few topics that maybe culture and secular culture, society would say is unbelievable. How could you guys believe that? How could you believe there's a creator as opposed to, kind of a big cosmic accident? How can you believe that this holy book you call the Bible is truly inspired, inerrant, and infallible? And then this week, week 3, we're talking about the resurrection. How can you believe that a dead man actually came back to life? And so that's what we're talking about this week. I'm here with my good buddy, Christian Putman. He is our new Coeur d'Alene campus pastor. Excited for you, Christian, and the journey ahead of you. And you spoke at the Coeur d'Alene campus this week. And Sam Meredith, another good friend of mine here at the Post Falls campus, executive pastor here. And then the best friend I have in the world, Jim Blazin, at our North Campus, campus pastor at our North Campus. And so I just thought, guys, we'd go around and just kind of share the different perspectives we had on the message. What approach did you take? What questions did you answer? And where'd you go with the message? So CP, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, we just talked about kind of building off of the other two, that also there's so much to the resurrection, and because we've hit the scientific, because we hit the historical, for me specifically, I focused on the witness accounts, knowing that if we're looking at the other two messages, that we know there's a fine-tuned, intelligent design. Then if we can prove the Bible is true with the prophecies, the archaeology, the manuscripts, the history that stands alone to any other book, then we would go, okay, the Bible's true, so that means the God of the Bible is true. So we're hanging on the reality with the witness accounts that we've already answered those other questions. So the witness accounts, what we have in the Bible, and as well as non-biblical people, writers would say. And so I talked about the reality that Jesus appeared to over 500 witnesses. And I talked about in court, if some judge got up and there were 500 witnesses and all the stories lined up perfectly, they would go, that happened. And yet, because it's the Bible and it's so much under so much scrutiny, that we, in parallel, similar to the Bible, we have 1,700 manuscripts for the Old Testament, 25,000 for the New Testament. But for someone like Julius Caesar, who's in our culture and history, we have 75. So if we're paralleling things that are in our society, we have a crazy amount of witness accounts. And then we talked about how in there's all kinds of theories that they've tried to disprove the witness accounts because of how reliable our witness accounts are. Like, all of these men had nothing to gain. They were hunted, they were killed, they were put to death, they had nothing to gain. They wrote things in their witness accounts, like in the culture, the women were the first ones to see it. In the culture, the women's testimony wouldn't even be included in the law in the Jewish nation. And so why would you invent something in your testimony that would discredit what you said? So we talked about and journeyed through all of these witness testimonies and how they had nothing to gain, that their very words point to the truth. We talked about how Jesus was written in history, that there was a man who came and died, so the theory about it wasn't Jesus actually on the cross and later he was seen. So we journeyed through all those pieces, and then we went, man, if this is true, if there's an intelligent designer, if there's a God of the Bible, and we've proven the Bible, if we have more witness accounts and in comparison, then what does that mean? That means that the God of the universe came down, sent his son to die for us, that Jesus was God in the flesh, resurrected, which means the payment for sin has been made, and that he wants you in eternity. So we journeyed through that and a whole lot more, but those are some of the cliff notes. You could totally go back and watch, but it was super fun.
Cool.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I love, CP, one of the things that you said, the 500 witnesses, and is that 1 Corinthians 15?
Yeah.
I love that the founder of the faith didn't just go to one person and tell one person to go. Because how dangerous is that? You have like the Mormon faith. It's like Joseph Smith says, God told me directly and I'm telling you. Where Jesus is like, I'm telling hundreds of people and you're going to go spread the good news. And that just brings, I think, security to the faith and instead of just going through one person. So.
And I love with that too, in that account in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul references like, and many of them are still alive. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so not only did Jesus do that to the masses, but then that's even recorded. There's this reference to they're still around.
Go knock on their door and ask
Yeah.
them.
Talk to them.
Yeah, which I always like. So often people try to discredit the Bible to say it's like the telephone game. It's like it's passed on,
Right.
like one person to the next person to
Right.
the next. It's like that's so not accurate to how history was being
Right.
recorded and written about. So
That's so
anyway,
good,
just
yep.
increases the credibility of
100%.
what's there.
Yeah. Sam, you preached here at Post Falls. Where'd you go with it?
Yeah, so wanted to start off with what's around this debate of did Jesus really rise from the dead? What's the biblical standpoint? We started in Matthew, which I like in Matthew because he introduces that a conspiracy starts right there. That you have the religious leaders and the guards going, what do we do?
Right.
And so they come up with that the disciples stole the body, which is still being talked about today. That's a theory that people believe. So we started there. Also like to highlight in Matthew that some of the disciples, even after they saw Jesus raised from the dead, had doubts, which for me is encouraging and hopefully encouraging for us. Like the idea that evidence alone will cure all doubts, I just don't think is biblical as we see there. Not to say that we're to not press into those but anyway, then we talked about how not only do they have the doubts, but then Jesus sends them out, be on mission. Like that your doubts aren't a big enough obstacle to like remove you from my team. Which hopefully again is this encouragement for us. Then we talked through the opposing views and kind of the biggest obstacle that most people have, especially in our culture, is just the lack of belief in the miraculous and the supernatural, right? The materialistic or naturalistic mindset that just discredit, like right away, it can't be a resurrection because that's impossible. So now there's all these other theories. But we talked about how in week 1 we settled that with our universe. Wasn't there, and then it came in. Like the idea of a miracle, something operating outside of our norm, we've already talked through that. So hit that, talk through the different theories, and just to me, the biggest piece in that was where's the evidence against it? Like where's the body? Where's the to silence it?
Right.
The evidence against the resurrection is silent, which just says a lot. And then we ended with on the practical note. Okay, like making this personal. It's not just evidences. This is just it's my sin that put Jesus on the cross. And to me, the greatest miracle isn't that God can raise somebody from the dead, but that he can forgive me and love me and accept me and include me in this great, great work. And then to go, okay, how do we then live as people on mission with this message of hope? And
That's good.
That's really good. Yeah, it's super good. JB?
Yeah, I was just thinking about your comment, though, about the supernatural. And if you look at all of the adventure or action-packed movies that are going on right now, there's a real hunger for the supernatural, except when it comes to the God of the universe.
Yeah.
You know, that's crazy. And one of the things that was a theme that I kind of felt through the whole message as I was preparing was that we don't have this blind faith.
Right.
That our faith is rooted in some evidence, some really significant evidence. And so I took kind of the evidence track with it. I mean, I started if Jesus didn't die, then there's no point talking about the resurrection. And I just kind of walked him through that. But we kind of went through the evidences and then got into Matthew and the conspiracy theory and just the length that they would go to cover up the very people that were responsible to nail him to the cross, and then the length that they would go to covering up and trying to wipe that all clear. That's very revealing of the condition of our hearts even at times, right?
Yep.
So one of the things that I thought from an evidences perspective that's so powerful is I use the example of 9/11 because the distance of time between the crucifixion, which is somewhere right around 30 AD.
30 AD, yeah.
And then you add, most people believe 3 years where Paul has his encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, 33 AD. Then you look at when 1 Corinthians was written, the early 50s, you've got about a 20-year span of difference, which makes that comment about some are still alive so valid.
Yeah.
So then I asked the question about if someone came with 9/11 20 plus years after it and gave us a completely different narrative and said there were no airplanes, that we didn't see the demise of New York and the buildings coming down and all the dust and all that stuff, Like, you think we would have some pushback on
Right.
that story?
Right.
Yeah.
And so
great.
here
That's a
they
good
were
point.
in Jerusalem, Peter in Acts 2, preaching the lights out in Acts 2 at Pentecost, right? The one you crucified to the Jews.
Yeah.
They didn't hide it. It was all there in the
Right,
open.
right.
Just powerful. to
Totally.
me.
Yeah.
Powerful, powerful.
JB, was that one of the evidences that you used for the crucifixion? Is that these disciples who just 50 days before Acts 2 were running for their lives,
They were hiding. Yep.
I mean, they were cowardly, betraying, denying, locking themselves in rooms, going back to fishing. I mean, all these different things.
Well, and it was Mother's
how
Day,
they're-
so to Christian's point about the first witnesses being women, I just talked about how courageous some of our women are. Because the guys were hiding and they were like going to go finish the burial. To me, I'm like, wow.
Dang. Moms are like, yeah.
No, but you know what? It's just like you guys. I got super encouraged at the end of the whole thing, just thinking about what an amazing God that we have, and he's so transcendent. I mean that his control and his sovereignty over life and death, and over each of our lives and death, is so special to me. And that he gave us that picture through Christ Jesus.
That's so good.
And that we're, when Paul says, oh, death, where is your sting? It's like,
I went through the kind of 5 well-known facts of the resurrection that people widely accept, even skeptics. Like the crucifixion of a man named Jesus is widely accepted as a fact. There was an empty tomb, was widely accepted as a fact. Now, they won't say it was because of resurrection, it was a stolen body, it was the swoon theory, it was whatever, right? The third well-known accepted fact were post-mortem appearances by the disciples. Skeptics will say, we believe they saw the risen Jesus. That's a well-known fact. Like they claim to see Jesus. Then you have the transformation of the disciples, of Paul, of the half-brother of Jesus, James, widely accepted that they were transformed and something changed in them. And then the 5th fact was that Christianity exploded in the 1st century. And so these aren't, I mean, there's maybe some debate out there. It's a minority of people that would disagree with those facts. But then I went and gave the objections. Okay, well, you have the crucifixion. Well, it was the swoon theory. You have the empty tomb. It was the stolen body theory. You have the post-mortem appearances. It was the hallucination theory. You have the transformation of the disciples. Well, they died for a lie. You have the spread of Christianity. They just picked and chose from different pagan religions and formed their. There's always people that are going to go, yeah, but. And so I just talked about it. I said, here's let's just equip you. Here's the rebuttal. So when someone says, well, this is what happened, you can go, well, let's talk about that. Let's equip our people to have those conversations. So I said, here's 5 evidential proofs of the resurrection. I said, but now let's talk about an anecdotal proof. Jesus changed my life. If there isn't a resurrected Jesus, I don't know how I go from who I was for 24 years to who I've been for the last 16 years. I did everything I could to jack up my life and to ruin my life and to run from Jesus and to indulge in the world. And now I live a changed life, not just because I'm a pastor, but because I've learned to love and I don't have the anger I used to have, and the desires that I have changed and shifted, and I still wrestle with sin and all those things, but God has changed my heart. And so I said, okay, you have these evidential, but I said, now you have an anecdotal. I said, but let me ask you this. I just asked the congregation this. I said, who here has that same anecdotal experience with Jesus? And the majority of people raised their hands. And I said, when you get enough anecdotal experience together, what does that turn into? Evidential. I said, so we are the witness to the world, which then I went to Matthew 28 as well, Sam, and I love that passage in Matthew 28:17. Jesus met them on the mountain. They worshiped him, and some doubted. And it wasn't like, it was the 11 disciples. It was his guys. They worshiped him, but some doubted. And so in verse 17, there was doubt, but then in verse 18, Jesus still commissions them. And so your doubts don't disqualify you, even if you don't fully understand everything, you don't get it, you're wrestling with it. Jesus still says, I'll meet you there. Like, you're not going to have perfect faith ever, but I can still use you in that. And so I just love that. And I talked to people after, they were like, thank you for telling me that I'm not disqualified for questions I still have.
Good.
So I think that resonated with people. But Blaze, we were talking about this before we started the podcast, So what's the difference? What do you guys think the difference is between doubts and questions and an unwillingness to believe? Right? Like where's that line drawn on, gosh, I have doubts, I have questions, I don't know if that's fully true, and this hardness of heart, like where does that turn into a hardness of heart where it's just like you're just looking for reasons to discredit it?
But I'm just thinking, I think about 1 Peter 3:15 that sets the whole basic foundation for be prepared to give an answer, give the evidence, but we're to do it with gentleness and respect. The hope that we have in Christ Jesus. And so, I guess when people come and they push back and they're the yeah buts kind of responses to it, I think our role as just disciples, period, is just to find out what is motivating them, what's driving their questions. Is it a real legitimate doubt? I mean, is it something they're just stuck, or is there something behind the curtain that they're hiding behind? You have people that push back on all these different areas. They keep their intellect. Their intellect is what keeps or separates them from everybody else, or it's their humor or whatever other thing that they prop up. And I think we've just got to discern what's the motive of their questions.
Is it coming from here or from here?
Right. Yeah. Because I think more times than not, there's hurt. There's just great hurt of the heart, and people are hiding behind what the defenses they can make, and just to keep God at an arm's distance because I've just been so hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, on that topic, I try to put people's questions in categories, help my mind, and I read this somewhere, but sometimes people just have plain questions, it's just did Jesus really raise from the dead, can be just what does the Bible say, and is there evidence? Then there's that's a plain question. Then there's complex, how could that happen? How do the pieces fit together? And I know for some people, that to me sometimes feels like why will you believe? What's going on? But they're really just trying to put all the pieces together, different than smoke screen questions. We were talking about, this question for a while, after a while, it's I don't think we're really having this discussion. Like you said, it's more of, I think something else is happening that's holding you back. And what is that? And sometimes I try to shift, hey, what's your experience been like with Christians? Or have you ever been to it? Try to just shift away from this intellectual evidence
that's
debate
really good. That's really
to
good.
what's
going after the heart.
Just to go into listening mode. Right. See if they'll share, if there's an openness there. And at different times, there is a lot of pain. There's a lot of hurt. And often, basically, I can't really believe there's a God because I've gone through this. If he does exist and he has all that power and he's good, why did my mom die? Or why did these things happen? And anyway, so then it's that's a whole different, that's listening, that's loving, that's being present.
Sam, obviously every situation is different, and it's hard to put a percentage on something like that. You can't blanket statement everything, but do you think the majority of people that have that hardened heart towards Jesus or Christianity or the church or whatever you want to call it, you think a majority of it comes from a place of hurt? I mean, you think it's I've been hurt by a Christian, I've been hurt by a pastor, by a church. Is that where a majority of it comes from in your experience?
I don't know if I could go majority. I think it's, especially our culture, and I work a lot with young people, and we're just getting so much more secular as a culture. And so young people, they haven't had a negative experience, but I'd say older people, middle and up, have way more. In some ways, the longer people live, the more they've had a negative experience with God or religion or church like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I mean, I grew up hearing all the evidence. I grew up with all of it in our home. So I was trying to process, even, I can't speak to everyone else, but to, even for me, because I walked away in 6th grade and then went through addictions till 19. And I think for me, I think of Romans 1, where it says that they traded about truth for God for a lie, that they suppressed it. I think the enemy for me got me to believe lies about who God was. So I suppressed, because God is a God who will just smite you if you fail. Or God is a God who, if you don't do all the commands, he's going to send you to hell. And so I started to believe incorrect things about him, which led me to pursuing him in incorrect ways, which felt empty. And so I know that everyone, like we're sharing, has different reasons, I'm sure, for their questions, but it's so valuable to understand who God actually says he is, and not just by what the world says or by what different philosophies say, because Satan's been doing this from the beginning. If he can paint an incorrect version of God, a God who's holding out on you, a God that doesn't care about you, then why would you want to serve that? So I'll suppress it and go after whatever else belief, create my own God or become my own or control it, or he doesn't exist. Now, I'm sure that there's all kinds of other reasons, skeptics who truly are trying to put the pieces together, like you're saying. There's all kinds of reasons why people suppress, but I think the reality of Romans says that God's kindness leads people to him, that we can present the evidence, but it's that heart level through the cross that really gets people's hearts, in my opinion. And so if someone is like trying to disprove it in that heart, and you give them the resources, and they're like, "Oh, I don't read. That's not what I do. I just want you to tell me," right? They may not be ready there. There might be something hanging them up. But how do you love them and ask them good questions and come alongside them and point them to the God of the cross who came and died for them in that process?
You know, one of the things I'm thinking of when you say that, like I have friends that are engineers and they have scientific minds, and they're very sequential in their thinking. And I think that's just part of that is the way people are hardwired. And that's their journey to the cross. You know, and then there's some people that through faith have the gift to just receive without questioning stuff. And maybe what we should be saying to our people to encourage them is that even in our life groups, you have people on all ends of the spectrum. You have people that are hurt, that for whatever reason, and use that as a prop to resist God. But you have people that genuinely have a pure faith that they just don't struggle with it. But the challenge maybe for them is, how do you take these evidences and help someone else? Just because you feel that way doesn't mean everybody else experiences that in their journey, right? And especially with kids. So, I mean, it's just a widespread.
You know, we were talking about this before, CP. Romans 1, it talks about the hardness of people's heart, and the wrath of God has been poured out on all mankind who suppress the truth with their wickedness. For what could be made known about God has been made clear to them. And you know, he basically goes on to talk about creation itself is enough for people to know there's a God. It says no man is without excuse. And so, but there's a hardness of heart because people suppress that truth that's been made clear to them by their wickedness. And I think oftentimes if I submit to this God, I have to listen to him. I got to do what he says. I got to follow him. I got to give up what I want to do. It's that whole self-ruled lifestyle that I don't have to give up and lay down. And we've talked about this before, even on this podcast, where God isn't wanting to take something from us that's good. God is wanting to give us something that's better, right? And he's wanting to the things he takes from us are things that aren't good for us, you know, or aren't as good as the thing that he wants to give us. And so it's like, well, I don't want God to take these things from me, but what he has to offer you is so much better if you would just submit to him. And so the thing that I talk to people a lot about that are struggling with going, you know, this person, how do I get through to them? How do I help them understand? How do I lead them to Jesus? It's like, you don't. Like, you can't. Like, you can pray for them, you can encourage them, you can speak truth to them, but 2 Timothy 2:23-26, it basically lays it out that our part, avoid foolish and ignorant disputes. They're going to generate strife. A servant of the Lord must not quarrel. Be gentle to all, able to teach, patient, in humility correcting those who are in opposition. And then it says, but if God perhaps will grant them repentance, so they may know the truth, come to their senses, and escape the snare of the devil, who's been taken captive by him to do his will. So the hard thing is when you have that loved one that is just like, I don't believe in Jesus, I don't believe in the Bible, I don't believe in creation, I believe in evolution, I believe in the soul and body theory, whatever it is. Present the truth, do it in love, do it with humility and grace, and you know, pray for them and ask God to open their minds and their hearts to receive the truth, which is the hard thing.
I think it's completely relational because we can't assume. We hear certain words and then we assign motives to that person. then we throw up a wall for fear
Right.
or insecurity. We need to weigh in with him. We need to walk in the water with him, hear what's going on, kind of like your matrix of questions that you're evaluating, Sam, and go, where is their heart? And once we have an idea, then God shows us.
Yep.
Whether we zip it or we just let them sit in their dirty diapers,
Yeah.
or if we, provoke them to think.
And that's
challenge
discipleship, right? Discipleship's the journey. It's not like I gave you the truth, boom, discipled, right? You're done and it's over with, and now just go love Jesus. It's a journey for all of us, and I know I'm thankful for 24 years people never gave up on me running from Jesus, and constantly were there to present truth and pray and never gave up. And I'm thankful for the people in my life that journeyed with me, even when I was being a big turd. On that, we're back next week for week 4 of the Overtime Podcast, talking about the faith, the church. How was that instituted? What is the church? What does it mean to be a part of the church? Why do people get hurt in the church? What does that mean? And how do we know that the church that we call the church today is what Jesus truly meant when he wanted to establish his church? So we're looking forward to